Hello everyone. Today we will study the poem by Stephen Spender, An Elementary School Classroom in a Slum. I would give you a few minutes to look at these photographs. Take a minute and think, what is the kind of education being imparted in these two different classrooms? On one hand, you can see a well-furnished classroom. Though there may not be any students sitting right now, but this is the classroom they'll be coming to. And on the other hand, towards your right, you can see a slum classroom where there are young children all settled down, waiting to be educated. Stephen Spender is going to talk about some specific issues in this poem. He's going to bring out the glaring gaps and marginalization, portray the conditions of youngsters residing in the slum, and compare the conditions of the haves and the have-nots. Let's learn something about the poet Stephen Spender. He was born in 1909 in London. He was a member of the generation of British poets who came to prominence in 1930s. A group sometimes referred to as the Oxford Poets that include W. H. Auden, Christopher Isherwood, C. D. Lewis, and Louis MacNeice. In 1930, he was deeply concerned with social issues and wrote about them with passion and pity. This is an excerpt from your textbook. These are details about Stephen Spender. I'll give you a minute to go through it. So now let's simply just recite the poem. Any explanation given before it would kill the beauty of this poem. So with no further ado, I'm going to begin the recitation. Far, far from gusty waves, these children's faces, like rootless weeds, the hair torn around their pallor, the tall girl with her weighed down head, the paper-seeming boy with rat's eyes, the stunted unlucky heir of twisted bones, reciting a father's gnarled disease, his lesson from his desk. At back of the dim class, one unnoted, sweet and young, his eyes live in a dream of squirrel's game in tree room other than this. On sour cream walls, donations. Shakespeare's head, cloudless at dawn, civilized dome, riding all cities, belled, flowery, Triolus Valley, open-handed map, awarding the world its world. And yet, for these children, these windows, not this map, their world, were all their futures painted with a fog. A narrow street sealed in with lead sky, far, far from rivers, capes, and stars of words. Surely Shakespeare is wicked, the map a bad example, with ships and sun and love tempting them to steal, for lives that slyly turn in their cramped holes, from fog to endless night. On their slag heap, these children wear skins peeped through by bones and spectacles of steel with mended glass, like bottle bits on stones. All of their time and space are foggy slum. So blot their maps with slums as big as doom. Unless governor, inspector, visitor, This map becomes their window, and these windows that shut upon their lives like catacombs break open till they break the town, and show the children to green fields and make their world run azure on gold sands, and let their tongues run naked into books, the white and green leaves open. History is theirs, whose language is the sun. So this poem actually reflects the farce of having compulsory education, but offering no real future for the thousands of children of the poor. He states here that there's much more to education than free schooling. In the first stanza of this poem, the poet is going to describe the, a few children sitting in the class. With a physical description of these few children, we as a reader get an insight to their economic conditions. It sets the context in which the whole poem has been written. The children staying in slums have a life full of struggle and lack hope and optimism. They are far, far away from nature, far, far away from the velvety world outside. They lack those amenities which are available to privileged people. These children are like rootless weeds. Weeds are unwanted plants of a garden. Similarly, are these children unwanted sect of the society. They are rootless because they have not actually been born here. Their parents have actually maybe migrated from other areas and settled down in slums. Their hair is scattered untidily around their pale faces. They lack stability. There's a tall girl with a weighed down head because she's either depressed or overburdened with poverty. There's a boy who's as thin as paper and is miserable and has underdeveloped body with eyes bulging out like a rat. A rat is a rodent and his eyes are always in search of food. So is the paper seeming boy. His growth is also not as per a child of his age. Apart from these two children sitting in the class, there is another child with a stunted growth because he's the unfortunate heir of his father's gnarled disease of twisted wounds. What does he recite from his desk? He recites his lesson. At the back of the dim class, there is another child who is lost in his imagination, creating his own fantasy world where he plays like a squirrel in a tree room. He is not interested in the monotonous environment of the classroom, and it seems he is not even affected by the poverty stricken area. When we look at this poem, I'd like to also deal with the word meanings as we go ahead. The rural background is described. It describes the students in the classroom, which are neglected and poverty stricken, and they have no energy. These are the word meanings. You can go through them as I've already explained them. The literary devices have also been highlighted. You may take your time and go through them. When we go on to the first stanza, I'd like you to pay attention to the pallor, the shabbily unkept hair. They're rootless. These children don't belong anywhere. They are the unwanted part of the society. The tall girl's head is weighed down due to some sadness, some shame overburdened. There are children who are very thin and malnutritioned. The rat's eyes are always in search for food like a rodent. And another child has inherited poor physical condition of his father, a gnarled disease of twisted bones. Apart from this, there's a boy dreaming, sitting at the back, so innocent, not bothered or affected by poverty. He dreams away. His innocence is contrasted with the rest of the children in the class. So the children that have been described in the class are the tall girl with a weighed down head, a paper seeming boy with rat's eyes, the stunted unlucky heir of gnarled disease, and the boy sitting at the back of the class, dreaming away. So coming to stanza 2, the poet depicts the critical condition of the pale and dingy yellow walls of the classroom. He compares the color of the walls to sour cream, which is an unhappy color. The classroom has a picture of Shakespeare, which was probably donated. The poet further compares the gifts given as donations and the picture of Shakespeare that hung on the unpleasant creamy walls, depicting dejection. To them, they are of no use. There's also a picture of a clear sky hung on the classroom walls, which depicts dawn and a beautiful triolus valley as well. These pictures represent the world that celebrates civilization, progress, and heavenly splendor, nature. There's also a world map that is hung on the wall, which is of no use because to them, the children, which are actually the world, there is no point introducing them to the world through an open handed map because their world is narrow and stuck in the boundaries of poverty and misery. Their future is shaky and dark and foggy. Their world is confined within the narrow streets of the slum, enclosed by the bluish grey sky. They are far away from rivers, seas that resemble adventure, excitement, and beauty as well. Also, are far away from the false promises that symbolize wisdom, the false promises that show them that there is a possibility that they can also have a better future. So if you look at this stanza, it describes the classroom and how the students are neglected as well. The few posters which have ended up as donations, they've ended up on the walls of the classroom and have no relevance at all. The word meanings are given here, and I have also explained it side by side. The literary devices have also been cited. Take a few minutes and you may go through them. As we continue with stanza 2, let us understand why Shakespeare is wicked. Shakespeare is actually symbolic of classic literature, indicating great academic knowledge, which is a contrast to the kind of education being imparted in the slums. And when you look further, the scenery of a city, the picture of a city with civilized dome and cloudless, which is totally in contrast with their dull, foggy lives. Their futures are not bright or clear, but vague and dismal. And when you look at these buildings, the domes, they symbolize power and wealth. These children cannot associate themselves with either Shakespeare or even with the picture of a civilized world. As we go on, the picture of a triolus valley, belled, flowery triolus valley, which is actually in the Alpine state of Austria, which represents natural beauty, a strong contrast with their derelict lives. They're all deprived of the bounties of nature. All this doesn't relate well. And further, an open handed map that offers itself to them. The world map represents the world outside the classroom, but actually they cannot associate with it because their world is just that narrow street, which where their future is painted with a fog. Narrow and sealed itself shows restriction, and lead sky is a term which further the color grey, lead, is indicative of negativity and loss of hope. The economic disparities and social injustices prevent them from having any future at all. There's a repetition of the word fog in the whole poem that emphasizes their dull existence and their bleak future. On sour creamed walls, apart from the other three and four donations adorning the walls, the sky outside doesn't really resonate with what is promised inside the class. The sky is lead, heavily polluted, dull, or dimly lit. It emphasizes their inhuman and unhygienic living conditions. The reason being, these slums are usually set up on the outskirts of a city near the factories, which are usually fuming out a number of gaseous, toxic gases, and their, their skies are never ever clear as promised. So, what are the donations that are hanging on the walls of the slum room? They are a portrait of Shakespeare, a photograph of cloudless at dawn civilized city, a photograph of belled, flowery, triolus valley, an open-handed map of the world. And remember, they are of no relevance to these children. Coming to stanza 3, the poet feels that Shakespeare is wicked and Map is a bad example because Shakespeare is actually misleading those naive children through his words, portraying the world is full of ships, sun, and love, which is really unreal for them, but it has a very negative impact on their minds. He feels that his plays actually tempt them to steal or take unfair means as they desperately make attempts to escape from their cramped holes. Their existence is very sad. These deprived children are so skinny that it appears that they are wearing skins. Their bones are peeping through their skins. The spectacles they are wearing have glass which has been broken and mended. Their entire appearance reflects their misery and poverty. The poet shows his indignation by suggesting that the maps on the classroom walls should show the reality of their life. It must show the huge slums instead of beautiful scenic graphics. Again, the poet comments on the posters decorating the walls. He questions the wisdom of exposing these students to vistas they will never ever experience. Again, the word meanings are given, and the set of literary devices where they talk about their cramped holes as a metaphor, similes, and the alliteration. Shakespeare is wicked because all the tales of his stories are full of love and life in ships. These are temptations for them to live a better life. They tempt them to steal. That is why Shakespeare is wicked. And why do they slyly turn to their cramped holes? Because their holes, their homes are overcrowded and confined and restricted. They return to these cramped holes very slyly. They don't want to be noticed, furtively and secretly, sneakingly. They go back to their homes, which are as small holes. So they are usually on the slag heap, the waste material from factories, as the slums are situated on the outskirts. Near factories, their whole environment is described as a slag heap. And these kids are so thin that one can easily see their bones through the thin layer of skin. Their skin is like a thin layer of cloth, and the bones beneath are visible through skin. Their lives are like bottle bits on stone. Their lives are shattered. So here we find these children are living in bad conditions. Their time and space are foggy slum and miserable slums. Therefore, the maps on the wall should be blotted with not false promises of well known places or locations on the world map, but they should be blotted with huge slums as big as doom. In stanza 4, Stephen Spender seems to be very optimistic. That's why this is one of my favorite stanzas of this poem. In the earlier three stanzas, when you read it, it seems as if Stephen Spender is very pessimistic about the future of these children. But actually, children, he's not pessimistic, he's drawing a contrast. He's trying to explain us the context in which the poem has been written. And by drawing out this contrast, he says that, that there's a lot of hope available for these children if each governor, inspector, or visitor is able to do justice to the way they must be inspecting and overlooking the kind of education that is being imparted. The poet says that the government should take notice of the problems faced by the kids. He urges them to change the life of these kids and make the world map a reality for them. There's no need to break restrictions which are put on them due to poverty. There's a need to break restrictions which are put on them due to poverty and lack of resources. He wants the governor, the public, the inspector to help these kids achieve their dreams. So it seems as if these children live in catacombs. Catacombs are tombs, cemeteries where dead are buried. And these windows actually, the best thing about windows is that when you close them, you shut the outside world from the inside and you keep whatever is inside away from the world. So these children actually are shut in these rooms and they live as if they were dead, like buried in catacombs. These very rooms become catacombs. So Stephen Spender says that the map would be able to become their window only if these windows would not shut upon their lives like catacombs. Allow these children to break them open and allow them to go and explore the world. Allow them to go and run on the cold sands. Allow them to read books and explore the world through books. And he believes that history, only those people can make a mark in history who have the opportunity of education. If you look at the colors used here, white, green, sun is positive, gold is a positive color, run azure is deep blue. All these are indicative of positivity. There are metaphorical devices, literary devices. Books and nature are expressed in form of white and green leaves. So they become very positive metaphors. And he wants to say that the windows which show these students the scene of the slum outside, They actually close upon their lives like catacombs, a series of underground tunnels used for burying dead. And unless something is done, their environment would become their graves. The images portrayed here are indicative of the kind of life they live, children. So let us create hope and opportunity. That's what Stephen Spender wants to say. He says that one can make mark in history by outshining others. To glow like the sun, they have to break free from the constraints of their slum lives. They will shine brightly after being educated. They must get rid of the dull, dreary rut of the school. This is what he wants from these children, for these children. They should have opportunities to experience the joys and the beauty of the world outside. They should experience life in the lap of nature. They should break free and become whatever they wish to become, and give them a hunger for knowledge. So what about us, the more fortunate, the haves? We must appreciate the educational opportunities that we have. And at this point of time, when the whole world is in a lockdown, children, we are still struggling to study. And we must appreciate that even despite being locked down in our own homes, we have the resources to continue with our education. But look at these children who are unable to do so. So let us be grateful. And Stephen Spender has been able to bring about a beautiful contrast between the haves and have-nots when it comes to imparting education. So let us evaluate the situation, not only be thankful about the situation we are in, but also be considerate about those who are not that fortunate. I hope you understood the poem. Thank you. So now students, let us look at some short answer questions. The first question is, what do you think is the color of our sour cream? Why do you think the poet has used this expression to describe the classroom walls? The color of sour cream is white, but not pleasant to look at. The poet uses this expression to describe the white classroom walls, which are also white, but not pleasant looking. The second question says, and yet for these children, these windows, not this map, is their world. Which world do these children belong to, and which world is inaccessible to them? There's a map on the wall. There are pictures which show beautiful hills and valleys. But the world of the poor slum children is not what is shown in the map. Their world is not sunny. It's darkened with fog of poverty and pain from their slum. Only dull and dreary skies can be seen. Both represent a beautiful world and high values which the slum children have never experienced. Since the slum children cannot relate to these things, there was no point of giving them the example of the map. The third question says, how is Shakespeare wicked and map a bad example for the children of the school in a slum? Shakespeare is wicked and the map is definitely a bad example because both of them entice the students to yearn for something that is totally unapproachable for them, inaccessible for them. Shakespeare is wicked because Shakespeare's plays are all full of ships, love, life, and such a kind of life which entices these children to indulge in negative activities like stealing. Therefore, it is wicked. Whereas map is a bad example because the world that is depicted on the map is something they cannot relate to at all. The map cannot be a good example for them to understand what is the world outside. The fourth question asks, what message does Stephen Spender convey through the poem? Well, the poem wants freedom for these children from a life of hunger, misery. He wishes that the children should be provided with quality education and not just free schooling. They should be brought out from their filthy surroundings into the comforting lap of nature. The fifth question says, to whom does the poet in the poem, an elementary school classroom in a slum, make an appeal? What is his appeal? The poet makes an appeal to his readers, especially to the educated and well-off people. The appeal is to help the poor children of the slum come out and be freed from their miserable surroundings. His appeal is that these children should be given quality education and not just free schooling, because education is what will hold the key to their emancipation.